the question would be, do you feel like you were late to the party? Do you feel like you gave yourself enough time to understand if it was real? Are you still skeptical? Like, how does Curt Signetti's Indiana football appear to somebody from the outside, like outside of the Indiana fan base?
Yeah. So everybody let Alex's first sentence sink in, that if Akron makes a field goal, didn't they miss they missed a field goal going into overtime, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
That if Akron makes a field, we're talking about one of the 2 or 3 worst programs in the country is beating a Big Ten team on the road. Like it wasn't
good.
bad.
Yep. Oh,
yeah. And so here Indiana is as a legitimate program. So the first thing Signetti did was obviously took everybody by storm by making headlines and causing people to click because he's trashing Purdue. And then he throws in Ohio State and Michigan in there. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. What's this guy do? He has no right to do this, but
we were saying that too, in a way, you know?
Well, yeah, I was saying it, but not in a like I'm mad way. I was like admiring it. I was like, that's cool. I like that. This is probably what Indiana needs. And what's the worst that can happen? The worst would be just Indiana continues to be Indiana and he gets laughed out of town in 3 or 4 years, but nobody really notices too much because he goes 4-8 3 times and gets fired. And that's, he's got the Tom Allen, even though we could go into Tom Allen, obviously 2019 and 20 have been really good teams.
Yeah.
But and he moves on, but that's what I think Indiana needed from a psyche standpoint. Somebody who would say, no, we're not going to put up with it. I'm going to instill some swag, some confidence. What we will never know. Maybe you guys could shed some light on this because I'm sure Curt Signetti as a coach and just a personality better than I do because you follow him all the time and I just pick up on stuff here and there. But I think he was that guy anyway. But I got to think that if he would have taken over at fill in the blank, Tennessee or somewhere, that he's not quite the same guy. He was himself and still is, but also he knows what he's doing. And he knows this program needs this. They're beaten down. They need a leader. They need somebody that's going to galvanize everyone, put them on the map in the off season. And again, I admired it. And then, of course, he backed it up, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think it's like it goes both ways. Like obviously Indiana needed Signetti, but I think in a way Signetti needed to go to a place like Indiana when he was going to make his Power 4 jump, because obviously with his resume, it was only a matter of time before he got a Power 4 job. But just like, where is it going to be? I don't think he is the same guy at Tennessee or Florida, which are West Virginia, which are schools that kind of, I guess West Virginia is kind of a different story, but I think it's kind of the perfect fix. He's a guy that wants to build. He's a guy that went from top recruiter at Bama on a Saban staff, recruiting Mark Ingram, Julio Jones, and Dante Hightower, to taking a D3 head coaching job. Not a lot of guys do that. So to take that risk on himself and go somewhere where he can kind of make something his own, I think is something that he, desires. And when all the hoopla was going around that he's going to be taking the Florida job during last season, I think we were laughing that off because I think we knew that Signetti, wanted a job like Indiana to really, he's kind of he's an arrogant guy. I think he's a guy that wants a statue at a school. I think he's confident in himself that he can accomplish it. Right. So I think it kind of goes both ways.
Well, that too. And to your point of like almost playing a character, this is something Signetti has acknowledged in interviews where he's like, he showed up and it felt like the fan base was on life support. So I was like, how do I inject any sort of excitement and confidence into it? Not that he's not a hyper confident, very competitive person. He is, like, very much so. But I think part of what he said at the basketball game and a lot of like the more brazen quotes he had at like media day and things like that, a lot of that was purposeful. I don't think if he walks into a program where like a Tennessee, like a Florida, where it's like you kind of just need somebody to drive the car, like you don't have to do much of that rawness to fire up the fan base. You just have to go out there and perform. Versus like Indiana football is like you kind of had to like remind people they existed.
Yeah, the fans needed a little spark, especially coming off a season where they go 4 overtimes against Akron, coming off, where there even was a point in time, like you mentioned, 19 and 20, like those were our junior and senior years in college. Like I look back history wise, and our 4 years, we didn't make a single tournament. We're known as a basketball school. Look at that 4-year period when we were in school. That's actually the best 4-year period historically in Indiana football history between 2017 and 2020. Having those, the 8-5 year, and then a year where they're basically ranked top 10 the entire year, and kind of, get a little snubbed by Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Conversation for another time, but
it was brought up just the other day. Somebody brought it up,
and then they had that letdown, right? And then it's just like, man, are we ever going to be good? Like they had a little taste of it, right? And I think there's something to Tom Allen walked so Signetti can run. I think all they needed was a little that spark to come back, and I think because that 2020 year, I mean, it was pretty much it was a football town for a little bit there. We were beating Penn State, we were beating Michigan, and we got a little taste of what could be, and all we needed was a little spark, and Sig brought it. Galvanization, as Jay Wizzle's saying in the chat.
Mark, you said somebody brought that up on the show the other day.
I'm sure you guys were Tom Allen fans at the time.
Mm-hmm. It was tough to see him go.
Yeah, he was fun to watch in a different way than Signetti. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was a character too. Any guy that's going to do laps around the stadium and be jumping up, high-fiving guys and headbutting players that have helmets.
He gave himself a black eye.
Yes, just nuts. The intensity is just to be marveled. It's crazy. Yeah. But Signetti is funny because when I watch him, I don't know if you guys get the same response. I don't have any investment in what he's saying, so it's just entertainment. But he's kind of he can be I don't like throwing around this word in this day and age because people take it the wrong way. But he's like got a little bully in him, and
for sure,
absolutely, yeah. But he's also sometimes he seems a little awkward, but not in an awkward way, in a way that people are awkward, like they're afraid or timid or shy. No, that's like, it's out there. This is who I am. And it's quirky. It's strange. He's all over the place. It's just fun to watch. I've never not been entertained by anything that this guy has said. Just even the quote, little halftime, coach's interview before they hit the locker room where, on the other end of the spectrum, Jim Tressel's going to tell you when Ohio State was up 41-0 at halftime, we're in a tough Big Ten game. We've got all the respect in the world for Northwestern. And it was, he's buttoned up. Signetti's in 15 seconds, he's going to say something that's going to just be strange or condescending or something that's going to be funny.
Yeah. Usually about his own team. Usually he'll be like, I was really pissed about a third down conversions. They're like up by 5 touchdowns. He's like upset that they didn't convert that 1 third down 2 possessions ago. Like he has these, it's very obvious he's a football psychopath, and that's kind of where those nervous tics come in. Not so much like you said, not like a unconfident nervousness, but just like, I only care about football. I'm always talking about football, so I might come off a little weird because I'm thinking about so many things. Can Signetti / Indiana be the breakout coach / program in the 2020s that Clemson was with Dabo in the 2010s?
Wow. Yeah, look at what Clemson did. Although to compare Clemson football to Indiana, Clemson was a top 15 to 20. I'd lean a more closer to 20 all time before Dabo.
Yeah.
They won a national championship in 81. They would consistently churn out, 8-4, 9-3 kind of teams fairly consistently. But of course, Dabo, took them off into elite status for a long, long time. The thing about Indiana is this Big Ten contract, this media contract. So, all other things being equal, and I'm not saying that they are, Indiana's making more money through the media rights than everybody outside the Big Ten. So that's an opportunity in and of itself. I think that I don't know where we stand on the status of Indiana high school football. I think that would certainly help. Not that it's
It's
ever
getting
going to be a juggernaut
Yeah.
or anything.
Ohio's right next door. I think we can figure it out.
Okay. And Illinois, they play
Yeah.
some decent football. You got some players over there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be tough, but man, I don't want to rule them out in any way. And then you got, there's always an argument, at least in some places, whether basketball helps or it hurts the football program. Like they push each other and help and support each other and bring that attention, which helps, or is it difficult to be great at both? And I know Indiana's not great, but obviously that's where their bread's buttered. That's
They're
where
trying to be.
that's what they've been, my entire lifetime. And when I was a big college basketball fan, Indiana's, they're one of the top 4 or 5.
I think you look at Alabama right now, and not that they had the best football season last year. You could probably say it's probably their worst year in quite some time. But like in Alabama basketball was a top 10 team in the country last year. Was being picked to be in a bunch of different Final Fours. So I think as long as you're committed to both and you have the financial backing to back it up, I think it's very achievable. Is it hard? Definitely. I thought it was interesting you mentioned the TV contract, because it's funny. One of the first things that Signetti said during his opening presser was, he's like, well, the TV contract stuck out. It's like one of the reasons why Indiana was appealing to him. So it's like, this is somebody who has his eye not just on like what's sitting in front of him, but the entire, like, where the sport's going. And this dude's got his hand on the pulse of the sport. And kind of back to a point we were making before the power went out here. Like, he's just so intense and laser focused and just determined to win that, to your point, like, it's to people who aren't on the same wavelength, it almost seems like slightly off-putting and a little bit like cocky and confident, but it's, the dude's got a standard and he just sets it, and it's like it just comes across that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. And can Indiana get that accomplished? I really, boy, if 2024 is any indication, with an expanded playoff, and I'm sure we could get into a debate, and we could bring others on to a debate in regards to how legitimate that bid was. I would look at it in 2 different ways. One will be this season, and seasons to come will legitimize that season. But I also think that each season should stand on its own merit. And just because if Indiana some way would go 6-6 this year, that doesn't illegitimize last season, because they're 2 different teams and each season needs to be judged and evaluated. But to
your point, like, if Indiana goes 6-6 last year, I could care less about the legitimacy of last year. We got bigger issues at hand.
All right, let's talk about this season.
Yeah, let's do it.
Mark Rogers, the prediction from you was 9-3. Indiana picked up a win from a couple months ago from the video that prompted my appearance on your show. So I guess I'll kind of start there. It was at 8. It jumped to 9. How'd you end up coming to that conclusion? And is that final, or are you giving yourself a little bit of a runway before you lock it in before the season starts?
That is funny that you bring that up, Alec, because I don't even remember that I went 8-4, or that was my prediction. But now I do. Now that you bring it up, I do a schedule breakdown when the schedules come out, and I kind of give I want to call it more of a projection, like, because people always want predictions. I like breaking down the schedules. I used to rank all the schedules from 1 to 70 or whatever, but it just got to be too involved. But I used to do that every offseason. I love breaking down schedules. So with Indiana, I kind of just eyeballed it and said, this looks like 8-4. Now, what I did this next go around was I started to look at personnel. I get the Phil Steele magazine, I get, other things, and I started to slice and dice. There you go. And
Brad's got his highlighted already.
Nice. Shameless plug here, everyone. We should have Phil Steele on sometime this summer. We always have for about 5 or 6 straight years. And he was actually kind enough to come on 2 times last summer. So hopefully He'll be on here soon, but
I would love to be on that
phenomenal.
show. Oh my goodness.
He's great. He's great. So once I started to look at personnel, what really turned it for me was offensive line. I thought, okay, this is a pretty good stout group here, and they've made some couple key additions via Colorado and Notre Dame for the offensive line,
and Ohio State and your Buckeyes.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And then on top of that, you also have so the quarterback. Watching him play at Cal, I think he's a gamer. I think he's a baller. I don't think he has like high-end NFL talent, but he's like a scrapper. He's an interesting guy. I think he's a leader. I think he's a gamer, a scrapper. He'll fight, he'll claw, he'll improvise. I like the quarterback edition. So quarterback edition, when I really thought about it, offensive line. And then when and I got my notes right in front of me, when I sized up, all right, their top tackler's back, their best pass rusher, their best corners back, most likely their best safety. It just started to push my thinking. Trying to find a fourth loss in the Big Ten was becoming more and more difficult. So I said, I got to tell you guys that the 8-4 was more like a default, like, okay, well, obviously they're winning the 3 non-conference games. And I really this team can't go better.
We'll
than
talk about the
8-4.
non-con after. we'll talk about the non-con after, because
Yeah.
I appreciate your thoughts on it, and we'll try and get into how do we fix that. But sorry.
So that's kind of where I arrived on 9-3.
Yeah.
I really looked at quarterback, offensive line, and top end guys on defense.
Yeah, I love that. We can debate. Have you seen the Mendoza kind of NFL hype though that he's been getting this offseason?
No. So maybe
I've seen him as high as 4 overall.
Oh, okay. So maybe well, there you go. That backs
what you're saying. He's
mine was more like I just didn't think. I'm like a huge NFL guy from the past. I used to know more about the NFL than college football, but I'm kind of tuned out to that now. So I just assumed he wasn't a big NFL prospect. I was just going over from what I watched with him. I like him.
But I think you nailed it around the head. Like he is a very good leader of men. If you just listen to any kind of the 98 yards with your boys, kind of when he came back on Stanford, and just any sort of interview he's done since he's committed to Indiana. And if you just hear about his story, kind of from a very hardworking Cuban family back in Miami. I mean, he checks a lot of boxes. And then on top of all that, he's a gamer, like you said. And then on top of that, has the 6'5" frame and a powerful arm. Lot of check boxes that he has. And I see this season going as far as Mendoza takes us. And I'm high on him. So my prediction's 11-1. But 9-3 would be, Mendoza's probably just as good as Rourke, maybe a little worse. Maybe, he's not as good as maybe I thought. Right. That's kind of where I'm at. But I think Mendoza is going to be good, hence kind of a higher end record prediction on my end. Keezer, you got more on Mendoza?
Yeah, well, I was going to say a couple of things on Mendoza. One, him and his brother were going door to door selling mangoes in like 6th and 7th grade. Just like pure confidence, not afraid at all. He was hit 50 times last year at Cal. He's not going to get hit that much at Indiana. And then it was funny, Pat Coogan went out of his way to say this, but he makes eye contact with every single person in the huddle. So it's like when those things you see of him, we're like, oh, I think this guy could be a pretty good leader. It's like he's literally engaging every single one of his guys. It's like it's almost like it's funny. Like with Signetti, I find myself saying this a lot, and then with Mendoza, I find myself saying this a lot. Is like both of those guys just say and do the right things over and over again, and it's not forced. It's not like out of their personality. It's just like they just act, and it's just but like movie-esque in terms of like green flags. It's crazy.
So and then another thing about the O-line, I mean, I'm glad you called them out, because that's a unit that was nominated for the Joe Moore Award, which is the best O-line unit in college football. They bring back 3 of those starters, add in a Notre Dame transfer, add in an Ohio State transfer, then bring in Khalil Benson as kind of that 6th O-line, swing O-line that can kind of play all 4 positions besides center. And all of a sudden you have tons of depth at that position. Tons of playable depth, as I like to call it, when I talk about the trenches. I'd say, you know, Indiana's about like 8 playable guys with a couple redshirt freshmen coming in that were kind of starting in spring camp this year. It was already a top unit in college football last year, and it's looking like they might even be better than they were last year. And they got, you know, Hemby, who was it? Ellison and Lawton, they combined for 22 rushing touchdowns. It could be a similar type, you know, 5 rushing touchdowns down the middle against Nebraska. It could be the same type of feel with this unit as well. So I'm glad you called them out. And by the way, those top 3 guys, the pass rusher, corner, and linebacker, they were all Americans in different sites across the board. They're all projected all Americans this year, obviously, given their, you know, accolades last year. So I mean, I see this team as nothing short of loaded, to be honest. So, you know, with the schedule, you know, 9-3 isn't crazy in my opinion. It's still an over at 8.5, but yeah, totally respect your opinion, but you know, just letting you know, I think we're a little more loaded than you're giving us credit for. I think there's a little bit of, you know, Indiana brand is kind of what we call it on this show a little bit. So yeah,
it's funny because you like look at Indiana and you're like, well, last year was magical, but there's no way they can repeat. And then you look at who they brought back. To your point, it's like they're bringing back a lot, but you start to go position by position with this team. And it's like you start with Mendoza, and it's like NFL buzz, whatever, but it's like absolute gamer. Like they got a check mark at quarterback, they have a check mark at offensive line, they have a check mark at defensive line, check mark at linebacker, in the secondary. Like the receivers, like the love Elijah Surratt's getting right now is insane. Like and that group is one of the best, most underrated in the country. And then to hear, like Brad was giving me the rundown of Phil Steele and like how he's talking about the different position groups, and to hear somebody like Phil Steele talk about those position groups the same way that like I perceive them is like gives somebody like me a lot of confidence.
Yeah, Phil Steele has Indiana's receiving core as number 9 in the country, bookended by Oregon and Georgia this upcoming year. So I mean, they're loaded at the weapons room. I mean, that scheme with Shanahan, they're going to be a much more open playbook with the mobility of Mendoza too. They're going to do a lot more, you know, play action, a lot more rollouts, get Mendoza out of the pocket, make a play. There's just a lot more to work with this year, as opposed to, you know, you got a solid pocket passer, super efficient Curtis Rourke, but Mendoza might be able to take him to a different level.
Yeah, you know, they're playing a game right out of the gate in the Big Ten that people are going to look at as, okay, who's for real here? And whoever wins this game, we're going to continue to watch them. The other one, we're going to forget. Now, I don't take it to those extremes. I watched too much football and too much sports for too long to write teams off that early. But that's going to kind of be the perception of, okay, we can't believe in both of these teams. We're going to believe in the winner when they take on Illinois. And then going right into Kinnick Stadium after that, obviously the Big Ten scheduling right out of the gate is key.
It's not kind. The schedule is tough. It's funny to talk about Illinois because it's like we look at. I did the like schedule comparison of like teams when Indiana like played versus Illinois and versus Iowa, and they like the point differential that Indiana put on those same teams was just. It was actually, I think they beat those teams worse than they beat the teams in the non-con last year. So it's like, did those teams make up that much ground, or did Indiana get that much worse? It's like, it's hard for me to see that, but it's like going to Iowa is always a challenge. Like Illinois, to your point, people are going to be like, whoever loses that game is done. It's like, those actually might be 2 top 10 football teams that play early in the season. Like if Indiana wins that game, like I'm not writing off Illinois. That team's might have been properly ranked. And I'm the one saying Indiana's misranked. So it's like to write somebody off that early in the season is crazy. But again, another one of your points, like this Big Ten schedule is not doing Indiana any favors. Home for Illinois, at Iowa, bye week at Oregon. It's like, so we can get into the non-con now and kind of how to fix that. But it's like, it's hard for me to hear like Indiana's schedule is so easy when it's like, those first 4 conference games are about as hard as you can possibly get.
Yeah, it's a good thing we got 3 tune-up games, you know, to figure some things out before Illinois, you know, just you know, let's throw a couple 50 burgers on the board, and then we'll get into Illinois and get in a dogfight with them, which I think it will be a dogfight, even though it's at our place. And, you know, I don't want to get too comfortable because we did blow a ton of teams out last year. So I can't be just expecting that week in and week out. Would be nice to blow out Illinois, but I do think they're going to be pretty solid. I like Altmaier. I think he's an absolute gamer. They got a couple good DBs that are coming back. But when I think stack them up against the personnel against Indiana, it's just like every position group, Indiana just has a slight edge. You know, I'm taking. We can call Mendoza, Altmaier a wash, but I mean, I'm taking Roman Hemby. I'm taking our receivers. O-line is where it could probably be. You know, there's probably a heavy debate there, but I mean, we got 3 All-Americans on the defense each level, and I don't think Illinois just doesn't have that. You know, they have good players. Xavier Scott's a very solid player, but I mean and Brett Bielema coach teams, you know, they're going to play good defense no matter what. Yeah, I can't wait for that game. And I think Marky nailed on the head where it's like Indiana wins. It's like, oh, maybe Illinois wasn't that good. And then if Illinois wins, it's like, oh, Indiana's bad again. You know, it's like, it's a lose-lose for either team. It's like
with those two teams, the winner won't get the level of credit that they deserve. It'll be more about, well, it was about the other team not being that good.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah. All right. Let's fix non-con scheduling across college football. Because I have to be honest, when I hear your comments about Indiana football, my guard goes up, right? I'm like, oh, I gotta defend it. And then I hear like you just started the series, like you should be embarrassed, which is like the YouTube shorts you're putting out, which I'm a huge fan of. And the first school you attacked is Penn State. So it's like I can't sit here and be upset when everybody's getting the smoke. So I mean, I'll just give you the runway to kind of talk about your problem with the non-con, because I feel like you're going to hit the nail on the head for a lot of people. And then kind of maybe we bounce around some solutions.
So clearly there's a difference between what any particular school should do based on their self-interest and doing what's best for them versus what should be done overall in the sport. Those are two different things. Indiana has objectives, and Indiana circa 2023 and before was survival. Get to a bowl game, make some extra money, you know, make it look like a really good season. Do what's in the best interest. If there are no guidelines or parameters for scheduling non-conference games, then do what's best for you. So I don't have an issue. There is a poke the bear mentality to those shorts, and I'm going to get to everyone. Rutgers, you're up, and some other ones. Yeah,
Penn State got it already. They got it.
Yeah. So, I just want to be clear about that. It's like when I attack Notre Dame and get on Notre Dame about it not being in a conference. I'm not blaming Notre Dame. They do what they can get away with. I have no issue with Notre Dame. They act on the best interest of Notre Dame. They're not the problem. The problem is college football, not holding them accountable and forcing them into a conference. So the same thing lies true for Indiana. They're doing what they think is what's best for them. There should be rules in play. I think that the non-con should be completely taken out of the hands of the schools, and there should be a formula that's driven by a committee. I think there's just too many teams to give it like this NFL formula approach. I think there needs to be a committee involved, but there should be equitable non-conference scheduling across the board. I don't think that Indiana should be playing what we're seeing the last 2 years, and other schools, and USC should be playing Notre Dame and LSU in 2 out of 3 non-conference. Like, the inequity of non-conference scheduling is just crazy. But that's what's going to happen when the schools schedule themselves.
100%. Well, you have a school like Ohio State's going to play Texas in week 2. Like awesome. Penn State plays Villanova and like 2 schools I literally forget. Like it's like
FIU, Nevada.
And then you're like, yeah, Penn State's the number 1 team in the country, and Ohio State, who knows what the talent they have leaving and questions at quarterback. Like if they win 10 games, but one of those losses is to Texas, and they're potentially on the outside looking in because of their harder non-con. Like that's where ultimately I could see people having problems. So it's like, I full blown agree with you. Like the issue is not what the individual teams are doing to abide by the rules and look out for their best interest, but it's like, how do you not have like it set in stone, like the Big Ten and the SEC are just playing each other, like one team, or have like those conference games where you have like Power 5 teams on the schedule every year. It's good for the brands of both teams. Like, it's good for the fans. It's like, yeah, I'm going to watch Indiana play Kennesaw State and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. But like, it's like a low stakes, borderline meaningless, like get through without injuries and look good type of like showcase versus like actually how good is my football team.
Yeah, I think a big elephant in the room, and Jeffrey beat me to it, is, Big Ten SEC challenge. I mean, it's two conferences. It's clear. Like, I see it as, I know it's Power 4. I see it as Power 2, especially with the acquisitions of the 4 best programs from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten, and then SEC already considered the best conference, getting the top 2 schools from the Big 12. It's very obvious it's Power 2. I think college football fans would eat it up. I think it'd be awesome if Indiana could play South Carolina, and and then we'll put our money where our mouth is here. And what are your thoughts on that idea?
So, from the standpoint of forcing everyone to play a difficult non-conference game, check the box there, and then obviously just the entertainment factor, check the box, and then the rivalry factor of the two power brokers in the sport settling things on the field, playing like what we see in basketball, just a full Saturday of, 16 versus 16 teams, it would just be insane. It would be phenomenal. That somewhat flies in the face, somewhat, not all of it could be played under my system of bringing a level of equity to the non-conference play. Because what people want to see is they want to see Ohio State play Alabama or whomever you would choose to be the number 1 team in the SEC.
And
they want
Indiana
to see,
would get like Mississippi State, like no.
Yeah, in typical years, Indiana would play Mississippi State. Indiana now, maybe it's a Tennessee, it's a South Carolina, somebody like that. So that's actually not equitable. It's not fair that the best teams have to play the best teams. But I'm not going to get into the whole how I would schedule it. Yes, that would be phenomenal. I'll just state it that way. Yes, that would be great. Would love it.
Maybe like a little random generator, we got Vanderbilt versus Michigan, and then randomly we'll get, Purdue takes on Bama. I mean, that would still get a gauge as to, how these conferences match up, even if they are a little mixed matched a little bit. Obviously we don't really want to see Bama play Purdue, but I think where I'm getting at a little bit, just kind of, equity. I think it's the important word. I think
we get 3 non-conference games. If the SEC would ever get their act together in the ACC and actually play 9 games. So 3 non-conference games. I just want to make sure that the end result of those 3 non-conference games are as equitable as possible. You can't predict the future. Obviously, teams get better and they get worse. So if Alabama has to play Ohio State, well, then they get a real break in the other 2 games, or it's balanced. So we could have those games under my. I've rolled out a system in the past that would ensure as much equity as you could possibly instill without being able to forecast the future. And just to answer the way you guys set this part of the conversation up, the problem with the entire sport is nobody runs the sport. The sport is run by the conferences. You don't have in the NFL, the NFC East doesn't run their division and do whatever they want for their best interest, and the AFC South does something different and all over the place. No, they're all working under one company. They're all focused on what's best for the NFL. That's all that matters. And what gave us the best indication of how the sport is run and how it operates is COVID, the pandemic year. The NCAA, they were nowhere to be found. We had no idea what they were doing. It was the SEC basically said, we're playing football and we're going to bring in every expert possible to figure out how we're going to approach this. But we're going to play football. And the Pac-12 was running scared in the opposite direction. We're not playing football. There's no way we're going to play. And the ACC and the Big 12 basically said, well, if the SEC can do it and they're going to do it, well, they kind of followed suit. And the Big Ten was the most interesting to watch because you had academia say, no, we're not playing. No, we got to lock down. But the fabric of the footprint in the Big Ten, the coaches, the players, the fans are so pro football, meaning not pro football, but pro playing football,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that there was this struggle that was really massive to watch. And obviously the football side of it finally won. But that was on full display as to this is how this sport's run. Now we get to see who really runs this sport. Well, each conference runs its sport. It's not Greg Sankey's responsibility to look out for college football. He looks out for his conference. That's what he's paid to do.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. So I guess when, you're commissioner of college football one day, Mark, I would like a job. That's all I got. That's all I got. I would like to help.